Hello, friends, and welcome back to Sovereign Judgment, where suburban authority figures discover that clipboards are not, despite decades of aggressive field testing, legally recognized weapons. Today's story is about a fence, a woman with a measuring tape, and the moment a city preservation board looked at my backyard and accidentally turned an HOA complaint into a protected landmark. Some neighborhood disputes begin with barking dogs or overflowing trash cans. Mine began on a Tuesday morning with a certified letter printed on paper thick enough to qualify as light construction material. Tell me where you're listening from in the comments, especially if your neighborhood has ever tried to regulate something that was standing there before half the board members were born. All right, let's open the envelope. The letter arrived at 9:14 on a Tuesday morning, delivered by a postal carrier named Leonard Pike, who held it at arm's length like it contained either anthrax or an invitation to a timeshare seminar. "You'll need to sign," Leonard said. "Is it good news?" He looked at the return address. HOA. So no, not unless they're announcing their dissolution. I signed his electronic pad with my finger. The signature looked like a cardiogram recorded during a bear attack. The envelope came from the Meadow Glen Residential Harmony Association, which was our homeowners association's full name, and also the phrase I imagined playing over loudspeakers in a dystopian retirement colony. The front displayed the association's embossed oak tree logo in dark green ink. The oak tree had 13 leaves, which I knew because the board had once spent $4,800 commissioning a brand consultant to make it look more community-forward. It looked like broccoli wearing a necktie. Inside was a one-page notice titled, "Final Demand for Architectural Compliance." This was impressive because it was the first demand I had received. According to the letter, my rear fence exceeded the association's maximum permitted height by 23 inches. I had 10 calendar days to reduce it to 6 feet, or face an initial fine of $350, followed by penalties of $75 per day. At the bottom, in bold type, it said, "Failure to comply may result in lien action." I read the letter twice while standing in my kitchen wearing pizza socks and holding a mug of coffee that had gone cold sometime during the previous presidential administration. Then I looked through the back window at the fence. It was 8 feet tall, made of dark chestnut boards, and ran 112 feet along the rear edge of my property. The posts were thick, square-cut timbers. The boards had uneven tops because they had been shaped by hand, not fed through some modern machine that produced lumber with the personality of hotel furniture. The fence had stood there since 1927. My grandfather, Walter Bell, had repaired it in 1964. My father, Daniel Bell, had replaced 3 storm-damaged boards in 1998. I had spent 6 weekends cleaning, sealing, and stabilizing it after I bought the house from my aunt in 2017. It wasn't just a fence. It was the last surviving section of the original boundary around Briar Farm, the orchard that had occupied the entire hill before Meadow Glen became a subdivision full of beige garages and residents who said things like, "curb appeal," without irony. The house mattered to me because my family had been connected to it for nearly a century. My grandmother had learned to ride a bicycle in the side yard. My father had carved his initials into the 3rd post from the gate and then blamed a traveling salesman. My mother planted the pear tree beside it during the summer she and my father got engaged. When I was 9, I fell out of that tree and landed in a wheelbarrow full of rainwater. My father laughed so hard he had to sit down. He still helped me out, but not before taking a picture. The picture remained framed in my hallway as evidence that love and humiliation can share a mailing address. I worked as a structural surveyor for municipal restoration projects, which was useful whenever old buildings started leaning in directions their architects had not originally intended. Most days, I measured brick movement, assessed timber frames, and explained to developers that historic character was not a synonym for remove it before lunch. At the time, none of that seemed relevant. I assumed the HOA had made an administrative mistake. That optimism lasted until 10:02 the next morning, when Patricia Wexler drove onto my property in a pearl-white Lexus SUV so spotless it looked afraid of weather. Patricia was president of the Meadow Glen Residential Harmony Association. She stepped out wearing a coral floral blazer that looked like a botanical garden had exploded during a corporate retreat. Her khaki pants had creases sharp enough to open mail. On her feet were white leather loafers with gold chains across the toes, because apparently even her shoes needed ceremonial authority. She carried a clipboard. Of course she carried a clipboard. People like Patricia did not merely hold clipboards, they wielded them like medieval shields forged from laminated complaints. Behind her came Board Secretary Linda Caraway, a narrow woman in an HOA logo polo shirt, embroidered so heavily that the left side sagged under the weight of its own importance. Patricia stopped at the bottom of my driveway and surveyed my house with the posture of a 4-star general inspecting troops who had personally disappointed her. "Mr. Bell," she called. Her voice had the tonal quality of a fork trapped in a garbage disposal. I walked out holding my cold coffee. "Good morning. It is 10:02, I noticed. "We scheduled a compliance verification." "No, you didn't." Patricia glanced at Linda. Linda glanced at the clipboard as if hoping an appointment might appear through faith. Patricia recovered. "As Association President, I am authorized under Section 8, Paragraph 3B of the Meadow Glen Property Standards to conduct visual exterior inspections during reasonable daylight hours." "You're standing in my driveway. This is a reasonable daylight hour. It's also private property. We have implied access." "Where?" "Under the covenants." "Which section?" Patricia's smile tightened like a jar lid that had sensed weakness. "Mr. Bell, the association does not engage in technical debates on residents' driveways. You brought a clipboard. That is documentation. So is the covenant." Linda coughed into her fist. It was a small cough, but Patricia looked at her as if she had publicly defected. Patricia pointed toward my backyard. "Your fence measures 8 feet, 1¾ inches at its highest point." "That's correct. The permitted height is 6 feet. When was that rule adopted?" 1994. "When was the fence built?" "That is not relevant. It seems unusually relevant to the fence." Patricia's expression shifted from confident to irritated, like a self-checkout machine encountering an unexpected item in the bagging area. "The board has received a complaint." "From whom?" "Complaints are confidential." "What does the complaint say?" "That your fence is excessive, visually obstructive, inconsistent with neighborhood openness, and potentially intimidating." I looked at the fence. It stood quietly in the morning sun, intimidating no one, except perhaps a rabbit with weak upper body strength. Who is it intimidating? That is subjective. Is the fence making threats? Don't be flippant. I'm trying to understand the danger. The danger is non-compliance. There it was. Patricia said non-compliance, the way a submarine captain might say hull breach. She opened a folder clipped beneath her board. Under Section 11, Paragraph 2C, the board may levy continuing fines. If those fines remain unpaid, the association may pursue collection remedies, including a lien against the property. For a fence built 67 years before the rule? For a fence that currently violates the rule? Was it approved when the subdivision was formed? Patricia's eyes flickered, only for a second. But I saw it. I do not have those records with me. Then how do you know it's unapproved? The burden of proof lies with the homeowner. Does it? Yes. Which section says that? Her lips compressed into a line so narrow it could have been used to level cabinets. You have 10 days. Could you send me the approval records? You have 10 days, she repeated, her voice rising like a smoke alarm reacting to toast. Then she turned sharply, caught one heel in the expansion joint of my driveway, windmilled both arms, and smacked the clipboard against Linda's shoulder. Linda grabbed her elbow. "I'm fine," Patricia snapped. "I didn't say anything," Linda said. Patricia marched back to the Lexus with all the wounded dignity of a swan leaving a convenience store. Before getting in, she called over her shoulder. 11:59 p.m. next Friday, Mr. Bell. After that, penalties begin. I took a sip of my coffee. It was somehow colder. Have a reasonable daylight hour. The Lexus reversed out of my driveway at a speed suggesting municipal retreat. I was calm until I went inside. Then I sat at the kitchen table and read the governing documents for 3 hours. The Meadow Glen covenants were 186 pages long. They had amendments, appendices, schedules, exhibits, and a landscaping guide written with the emotional intensity of wartime correspondence. I found the 6-foot fence limit. I also found the enforcement rules. Patricia had quoted them accurately enough to be dangerous. What I did not find was any language saying the rule applied retroactively. I emailed the HOA requesting the complete architectural history of my property, including all records relating to the fence. At 4:47 that afternoon, Linda replied, "Dear Mr. Bell, the association is currently reviewing archival materials. Your compliance deadline remains unchanged. Regards, Linda Caraway, Board Secretary." At 4:51, Patricia posted in the Meadow Glen Community Facebook group a reminder regarding property standards. Certain residents have recently questioned whether long-standing violations should be exempt from modern community expectations. Meadow Glen must move forward, not backward. Rules apply equally to everyone. She did not mention my name. She included a photograph of my fence. The picture had been taken from behind my shed, which meant someone had entered my side yard. I saved the post. I saved the photograph. I saved the metadata. Then I made a spreadsheet. Some people punch walls when they're angry. I create color-coded evidence logs with drop-down menus. Mine had columns for date, time, event, witness, document, applicable covenant, and level of absurdity. Patricia earned an 8 on day 1. The scale only went to 10. On Thursday, I received a second violation notice by email. It included a $150 administrative inspection fee, despite the fact that I had not allowed an inspection. On Friday, a man named Eugene Dobbs appeared at my rear gate, carrying a measuring wheel and wearing a reflective vest. "Can I help you?" I asked. "I'm here to measure the violation." "Who hired you?" "Are you a licensed surveyor?" "No." "Building inspector?" "No." "Contractor?" "I do compliance support." "What does that mean?" He shrugged. "They give me $50. I take pictures." Eugene had the honest, defeated face of a man who had answered a classified advertisement titled "Flexible Outdoor Opportunity" and discovered it involved being yelled at near shrubbery. "Did they tell you that you could enter my yard? They said the board has access rights. They don't." He looked down at his measuring wheel, then at the fence, then toward the street, where Patricia's Lexus sat half a block away. "She watching?" he asked. "Yes." Eugene exhaled like an accordion being placed in storage. "I'm going to measure it from the alley. That's public access." "Good." He walked away. 3 minutes later, Patricia called me. "You interfered with an authorized inspector. I directed an unlicensed contractor off my property. He is a compliance specialist. He told me he takes pictures for $50. That is an outrageous mischaracterization of Mr. Dobbs's professional role. Would you like the recording?" There was silence. It had the heavy, beautiful quality of fresh snow. "You recorded him?" "My security camera did. You cannot record association agents without consent. This state has one-party consent. You were not a party to his private remarks. He was speaking to me." Another silence. Patricia said, "You are being deliberately adversarial. I'm standing in my own yard." She hung up. By Saturday, the Facebook post had 43 comments. Most were from people asking why the HOA cared about a fence no one could see from the road. Patricia replied to everyone. To Carol Simmons, she wrote, "Selective enforcement cannot be tolerated." To Winston Hale, she wrote, "The board has legal fiduciary obligations." To Mark Jeffries, who asked whether the fence predated the subdivision, Patricia wrote, "Age does not confer immunity." That sentence interested me. I printed it. On Monday, the first fine arrived, $350. On Tuesday, another $75. Wednesday, another $75. By Friday, the balance was $650, plus the administrative inspection fee and a $45 document processing charge. The fines multiplied like rabbits with bookkeeping software. I appealed. The board scheduled a hearing for June 18th at 7 p.m. in the Meadow Glen Clubhouse. The clubhouse was a low brick building beside the community pool. Its main room smelled like floor wax, old coffee, and the accumulated disappointment of canceled birthday parties. Patricia sat at the center of a folding table with Linda on one side and Treasurer Dennis Kroll on the other. Dennis was a small man with silver hair and the expression of someone who had been lured onto the board by promises of free pastries. Behind them hung a framed mission statement, "Preserving harmony through consistent standards." Someone had hung it crooked. Approximately 30 residents attended. Patricia wore a navy blazer with gold buttons arranged like decorations from a military campaign fought entirely over mulch. She opened the hearing by tapping a tiny wooden gavel. Nobody had told me the HOA owned a gavel. The knowledge made me sad in ways I could not explain. This hearing concerns Property 17B, located at 412 Bellwether Lane, Patricia said. The owner, Mr. Thomas Bell, contests the association's lawful directive to reduce a non-conforming rear fence. I raised my hand. This isn't school, Mr. Bell. I have a question. You will have an opportunity to speak. You called it non-conforming. Was it approved when Meadow Glen was created? Patricia looked down at her notes. The association's records are incomplete, so you don't know. The current standard is 6 feet. Was there a grandfather clause? The board is not obligated to preserve outdated construction. That isn't what I asked. Patricia leaned toward the microphone. Her voice came through the portable speaker with a burst of static, like a robot clearing its throat, before issuing a parking citation. Section 8, Paragraph 3B, authorizes the board to regulate fences for aesthetic compatibility. Section 8 was adopted in 1994. Yes, the fence was built in 1927. As I have explained, age does not confer immunity. Several people laughed. Patricia's eyes moved toward the audience. The laughter died the way conversations die when a principal enters a cafeteria. I placed a folder on the table. This is a 1953 aerial photograph showing the fence. Patricia did not touch it. This is a 1978 county tax survey showing the fence. Still nothing. This is the original subdivision plan from 1992. The fence is marked as an existing boundary feature. Dennis leaned closer. It is? He asked. Patricia turned to him. We are not reviewing cartographic history. We're discussing whether the fence predates your authority, I said. Cartographic history seems invited. Linda studied the subdivision plan. This note says, existing timber enclosure to remain, she said. Patricia removed the paper from her hands with the speed of a magician confiscating the wrong card. That notation is not an architectural approval. It was signed by the original developer, I said. The developer is not the current board. No, he's been dead 21 years. A man in the back snorted loudly. Patricia tapped the gavel. The head flew off. It bounced once on the table, rolled past Dennis, and dropped into a cardboard box containing pool access forms. The room went silent. Dennis stared into the box. Patricia held the naked handle. For one extraordinary second, the symbol of her authority had literally disassembled itself in public. She set the handle down. The board will deliberate. You haven't heard my appeal. We have reviewed your submitted documents. I submitted them 30 seconds ago. Patricia's face tightened like a purse clasp in a high wind. Mr. Bell, your attitude does not help your case. My attitude isn't 8 feet tall. The board voted 2-1 to deny my appeal. Dennis voted in my favor. Patricia glared at him as if he had sold military secrets to a landscaping company. The daily fines continued. At $1,475, Patricia sent a certified notice threatening lien review. At $2,225, she had the HOA attorney, Clarion Mills Legal Group, mail me a demand letter. At $2,900, she posted another Facebook message accusing a small minority of homeowners of weaponizing nostalgia to avoid common standards. That phrase got 27 angry face reactions. I documented everything. Still, I nearly lost my temper on June 26. I came home at 6:30 p.m. and found a fluorescent orange notice stapled directly into one of the old fence boards. The staple had split the surface grain. The notice read, Final physical reminder. Unapproved structure. Removal required. I stood there staring at the puncture. The board Patricia had damaged was one my grandfather had installed in 1964. His pencil markings were still visible on the rear surface. I felt heat rise behind my eyes. For the first time, I wanted to walk across the neighborhood, ring Patricia's doorbell, and express my concerns in language not approved by the Community Standards Committee. Instead, I removed the staple with conservation pliers, placed it in an evidence bag, photographed the damage, and made another cup of coffee. I forgot about the coffee. It went cold. Then I called Salvatore Moretti. Sal Moretti ran Moretti Heritage Timber and Masonry from an old warehouse near the rail yard in fictional Hawthorne City. I had met him on a courthouse restoration project 3 years earlier. He was 62, 5'6", and shaped like a fire hydrant that had developed strong opinions about lime mortar. His eyebrows were magnificent. They entered rooms several seconds before the rest of him. When I arrived at his workshop the next morning, Sal was using a butter knife to spread mustard on a meatball sandwich large enough to require zoning approval. He looked at the photographs of the fence. Then he looked at the orange notice. Then he looked at the staple in the evidence bag. She stapled into original chestnut. Yes. His eyebrows rose like two storm fronts receiving bad news. On purpose, she wanted the notice visible. Sal placed the sandwich down. Tommy, there are people who make mistakes, and there are people who laminate their mistakes and bring witnesses. That sounds like Patricia. What do you want? I want the fines stopped. I want the fence protected. And I want everything legal enough that she can bring a marching band and still lose. Sal wiped mustard from his thumb. Good. Revenge is exhausting. Preservation comes with grants. I'm listening. He studied the oldest photograph. This fence was part of Briar Farm? Yes. Briar Farm supplied timber to the first houses on the East Ridge. I know. Local registry? Never applied. Why not? My family didn't think a fence needed paperwork. Your family had common sense. That's why they were never elected to an HOA. Sal walked to a filing cabinet, opened the bottom drawer, and pulled out a packet titled Hawthorne City Heritage Resource Nomination. He slapped it onto the workbench. The sound made a cloud of sawdust rise like a tiny ghost abandoning a table saw. You're a surveyor, he said. You can prepare the measured drawings. I'll do the material assessment. We document construction method, chain of ownership, historic function, surviving fabric, all of it. You think the fence qualifies? I restored the Wexler textile warehouse last year. I blinked. Wexler? Patricia's husband's family. Same Wexlers. She gave a speech at the ribbon cutting about preserving the physical story of our community. Sal smiled. It was the smile of a man who had just located the correct wrench. Tommy, we are going to help Mrs. Wexler preserve the physical story of your community, so hard, she'll need a commemorative plaque. I would have followed that man anywhere. The process was not quick. That mattered. I did not want a loophole. I wanted a foundation. The city's heritage ordinance allowed designation of structures, landscape features, walls, gates, agricultural remnants, and boundaries associated with historically significant local development. The Briar Farm fence checked 4 of the 6 eligibility criteria. It retained original chestnut posts. It used mortise and peg joinery uncommon after 1935. It followed the original orchard boundary. It was the only remaining visible agricultural feature from the land that became Meadow Glen. More importantly, Hawthorne City Ordinance 44-21-7 stated that once a complete nomination was accepted for review, no materially altering work could occur until the Heritage Commission issued a decision. Cutting the fence down would qualify as materially altering work. The ordinance also superseded private association restrictions when necessary to preserve a nominated resource. I read that section 4 times. Then I made a second spreadsheet. Sal performed a timber assessment on July 2. He arrived in a green work truck with Moretti Heritage printed across the doors in gold letters. His assistant, Gabriel Dunn, stepped out carrying a moisture meter, a camera, and a canvas tool bag. Gabriel was 6'7" and thin as a lamppost, experiencing financial hardship. Patricia arrived 11 minutes later in her Lexus. She parked partly across my driveway. Her golf cart escort, Linda, stopped behind her in a battery-powered neighborhood patrol cart with an amber light mounted on top. The light was not flashing, but its existence was enough. Patricia emerged wearing a white sun hat, enormous sunglasses, and a lavender athletic outfit that made her look like a tennis instructor summoned to negotiate a hostage situation. "What is happening?" she demanded. Sal turned from the fence. "Assessment. Authorized by whom?" "The property owner. I am the association president." Sal nodded. "I'm sorry to hear that." Patricia removed her sunglasses. Her eyes narrowed. "This structure is under an active removal order." Sal glanced at me. "Removal order?" "HOA notice," I said. "Oh," Sal replied. "Arts and crafts." Patricia's mouth opened. Gabriel coughed, but his shoulders moved suspiciously. Patricia raised her clipboard. Section 8, Paragraph 3B, prohibits unapproved alterations to non-compliant structures. "We aren't altering it," I said. "We're measuring it," Sal added. "You cannot perform commercial work without association approval." Sal looked around. "Is your association paying me?" "No." Then this isn't your commercial work. You are being intentionally difficult. Sal's eyebrows lowered like theater curtains before a serious scene. No, ma'am. Difficult is replacing hand-hewn chestnut after somebody puts an office staple through 98-year-old grain. This is me being polite. Patricia looked at the repaired puncture. That notice was properly posted. On historic material. It is a fence. Correct. A fence. Yes, ma'am. We've identified the object. Her voice rose like a vacuum cleaner inhaling a curtain. The board has ordered it reduced. And the city may order it preserved, I said. Patricia froze. What city? Hawthorne City. This property is in Meadow Glen, which is inside Hawthorne City. The association governs exterior structures, subject to municipal law. She stared at me, then at Sal, then at Gabriel, who was photographing a pegged joint with the calm concentration of a wildlife documentarian observing a rare bird. Patricia straightened with the posture of a general who had just discovered her army was technically a book club. What exactly are you applying for? Heritage designation. She laughed. It began as a sharp bark and ended as something a goose would not have claimed. For offense? Yes. That is absurd. You gave a speech last year about preserving historic structures, Sal said. Patricia turned toward him slowly. Sal took out his phone. I liked the part where you said, once we erase the physical evidence of our past, no amount of new construction can restore it. Strong line. Her face changed. Not much. Just enough. How do you know about that? Because I restored the building you were standing in. Linda looked at Patricia. Patricia put her sunglasses back on despite standing in the shade. This stunt will not interrupt enforcement. It already has, I said. I handed her a copy of the city's acknowledgement letter. The Heritage Office had accepted the nomination as complete at 8:35 that morning. Effective immediately, the fence was under temporary preservation review. No cutting, no removal, no reduction in height, no attachment of notices, no alteration without written city approval. Patricia read the page. Her chin pulled backward one fraction at a time, like a turtle reconsidering the outdoors. This does not waive association fines. No, I said. But it prevents compliance with your removal demand. Then you remain in violation of a rule the city currently prohibits me from following. That is your problem. Sal whistled softly. Tommy, did she just say obeying the law is your problem? I believe she did. I'd write that down. I already am. Patricia looked toward Linda. Photograph all equipment. Linda raised her phone. Gabriel stepped aside to give her a better angle. Patricia stormed back toward her Lexus, caught the brim of her sun hat on a low pear tree branch, and kept walking. The hat stayed behind. She made it 4 steps before realizing her head had become unexpectedly available to the weather. Sal removed the hat from the branch and held it out. Historic trees can be aggressive, he said. Patricia snatched it from him. The Lexus left hard enough to scatter 2 sparrows and 1 empty recycling bin. The city inspection was scheduled for July 11th. By then, Patricia had increased my account balance to $4,175. She also sent a letter to the Heritage Commission opposing the nomination. That was her right. The contents were less helpful to her. She argued that the fence had no meaningful historical value, that it was visually incompatible with neighborhood character, and that preservation would undermine the association's ability to impose uniform exterior standards. She attached photographs. One showed the hand-cut boards, one showed the original pegged gate, one showed the old Breyer Farm cattle mark burned into a post. She had accidentally submitted better evidence than I had. The Heritage Commission's staff report cited her photographs 3 times. The public hearing took place on August 3rd at Hawthorne City Hall. The commission met in a chamber with high windows, dark wood paneling, and microphones that made everyone sound as if they were testifying from the bottom of a well. 7 commissioners sat behind a curved desk. The chair was Eleanor Voss, a retired history professor with silver hair, rimless glasses, and the calm expression of a woman who had spent 40 years correcting people who were confidently wrong. The city preservation officer was Malcolm Reed. Malcolm wore a brown suit and bow tie and looked like a librarian who had been granted emergency police powers over brickwork. Sal sat beside me. Behind us were 46 Meadow Glen residents. Patricia arrived with Linda, Dennis, 2 HOA attorneys, and a presentation board mounted on an easel. The presentation was titled, Fence Height and the Future of Community Cohesion. It contained 17 slides. Patricia wore a crimson blazer with padded shoulders broad enough to support regional air traffic. Her clipboard was tucked beneath one arm. She gave me a small, controlled smile. It was the smile of a person who had rehearsed victory in the mirror and charged it mileage. Malcolm presented the staff report first. The nominated resource is a 112-foot chestnut boundary fence constructed circa 1927 as part of Briar Farm, he said. Approximately 64% of original material remains. The resource retains location, design, workmanship, setting, and association. Commissioner Voss adjusted her glasses. Staff recommendation? Designation. Patricia's clipboard shifted. Malcolm continued. The fence appears on the 1931 Agricultural Plat, the 1953 County Aerial Survey, and the 1992 Meadow Glen Subdivision Plan, where it is labeled, Existing Timber Enclosure to Remain. Dennis leaned toward Linda. Linda whispered something. Patricia stared straight ahead. Sal spoke next. He explained the chestnut species, joinery, tool marks, and repair history. He displayed a section drawing showing how the rails fitted into mortised posts. One commissioner asked why the fence was unusually tall. Sal nodded toward me. I answered. The original orchard grew heirloom pears. Deer pressure was severe. The farm ledger from 1928 records repeated crop loss. The fence was raised to approximately 8 feet to protect the orchard. So the height is historically significant? Commissioner Voss asked. Yes. Patricia inhaled sharply behind me. The sound resembled a balloon discovering taxes. Public comment began. Carol Simmons spoke first. I live 3 houses away. I've never seen the fence from the street. I didn't know it was 8 feet tall until Patricia posted a picture she apparently took from Mr. Bell's yard. Mark Jeffries spoke next. My grandparents bought in Meadow Glen in 1993. The sales brochure called the fence a charming remnant of Briar Farm. I brought the brochure. He held it up. The commission clerk accepted it. Winston Hale approached the microphone carrying a folder. I served on the first architectural committee, he said. We discussed this fence. The developer specifically excluded it from the new height rules. Patricia's head snapped toward him. Do you have minutes? Commissioner Voss asked. I have my copy. He opened the folder. Patricia whispered urgently to one of the attorneys. The attorney looked at the document and then looked at Patricia with the expression of a man watching his parachute leave without him. Winston read aloud, Existing Briar Farm boundary fence shall remain as a historic landscape feature and shall not be subject to standard residential fence dimensions. The room murmured. I looked at Patricia. Her jaw had become architectural. Then it was her turn. She marched to the podium with her presentation board and placed her clipboard beside the microphone. Madam Chair, Commissioners, my name is Patricia Wexler, President of the Meadow Glen Residential Harmony Association. I speak on behalf of 214 homeowners committed to maintaining consistent and equitable standards. Behind me, someone whispered, she does not. Patricia clicked a remote. The screen displayed a photograph of my fence with a red line drawn at 6 feet. The issue before you is not nostalgia, she said. It is whether one homeowner may use age as a weapon against uniform governance. Commissioner Voss lifted one eyebrow. Patricia continued in a tone like a cruise director, announcing mandatory lifeboat participation. Section 8, paragraph 3B of our governing standards, sets a clear maximum height. Mr. Bell has deliberately refused compliance. He has delayed enforcement, challenged board authority, recorded association agents, and turned a routine architectural correction into a public spectacle. She clicked again. The next slide showed my fence from the alley. She clicked again. The next showed the cattle mark. She clicked again. The next showed the mortise joint. Every slide made the fence look more historic. Malcolm Reed leaned toward his microphone. Mrs. Wexler, who took these photographs? I did. Were they taken before or after the nomination? Before. Did you observe the historic marks at the time? I observed an old fence. Did you consult the city before issuing the alteration demand? The association is not required to seek city approval before enforcing private covenants. Did you consult your own subdivision records? Our archives are extensive. That wasn't my question. Patricia's hand tightened around the remote. We relied on the current standards. Commissioner Voss held up Winston's 1993 meeting minutes. Were these records in your archive? Patricia looked at Linda. Linda looked down. Dennis closed his eyes. I cannot speak to every document maintained by prior boards, Patricia said. Mr. Hale obtained this from the association. That may be his personal copy. It bears the association stamp. Our former record-keeping practices were inconsistent. Commissioner Voss nodded slowly. Yet you fined Mr. Bell more than $4,000, based on the claim that the fence was never approved? The current board has discretion. To disregard its own records? To enforce present standards. Patricia's voice had climbed 2 octaves and was now circling the ceiling fan like a trapped mosquito. One of her attorneys touched her elbow. She pulled away. The board must retain authority, she said. If this commission designates every obsolete object that residents become emotionally attached to, orderly community governance will become impossible. Commissioner Voss looked over her glasses. Mrs. Wexler, this commission has designated 23 resources in 12 years. That is 23 exceptions. That is our function. Patricia clicked her remote again. Nothing happened. She clicked twice. The screen went black. Then, because technology occasionally has a moral compass, the projector opened the laptop's recent files menu. Displayed on the screen were several file names. Bell Pressure Strategy Final. DocX Bell Fines Escalation.xlsx. Facebook Language Options.docx. Fence Photos Private Access. Zip. The chamber became perfectly quiet. Patricia stared at the screen. Linda stared at Patricia. Dennis removed his glasses and cleaned them, despite the fact that clarity was no longer the problem. One attorney lunged toward the laptop. Patricia pressed another button. The file Bell Pressure Strategy Final opened. The first paragraph appeared 6 feet tall on the wall. Objective: create sufficient financial pressure to compel removal before outside review can interfere. Someone in the audience gasped. Someone else said, "Oh, Patricia." Patricia slapped the laptop lid down. The projector continued displaying the image. Malcolm Reed looked toward the city attorney. The city attorney began writing. Commissioner Voss's voice remained calm. Mrs. Wexler, did you prepare that document? This material is privileged. Are you an attorney? No, but it was prepared in consultation with counsel. One of the HOA attorneys leaned toward his microphone. Our firm did not prepare or review that document. Patricia turned toward him. You advised aggressive enforcement. I advised consistent, lawful enforcement based on verified records. You said fines were permitted, assuming the structure lacked prior approval. You knew the records were incomplete. That is why I asked you to complete the records review before escalating. The second attorney moved his chair 6 inches away from Patricia. It was the smallest possible physical distance and the largest professional distance I had ever witnessed. Commissioner Voss looked at me. Mr. Bell, were you aware of this strategy document? No. Did you authorize anyone to access Mrs. Wexler's computer? No. Did you know it would be displayed? No. Sal leaned toward his microphone. Ma'am, if Tommy could make projectors do that on command, I'd hire him full-time. The audience laughed. Patricia spun around. This is not funny. Her clipboard struck the presentation easel. The easel folded. The presentation board slid forward, hit the edge of the podium, and flipped face down over Patricia's head. For one magnificent moment, the HOA president stood hidden behind a 4-foot foam board titled Fence Height and the Future of Community Cohesion. She tried to push it away. The easel caught one of her heels. She stepped backward into a rolling office chair. The chair rolled. Patricia sat down without intending to, and traveled 6 feet across the polished chamber floor, still holding the remote, before bumping gently into the commissioner's desk. Nobody helped because nobody understood which part was finished. Patricia stood. Her hair had shifted sideways. The clipboard remained on the floor. Commissioner Voss folded her hands. Mrs. Wexler, please return to your seat. I have not completed my presentation. I believe the presentation has become unusually complete. The room erupted. Commissioner Voss tapped her microphone. Order. Patricia marched back toward the audience. Halfway there, the chamber doors opened. Officer Benjamin Cole entered with a city security supervisor. Officer Cole was a broad, tired man in his late 40s, whose face suggested he had personally responded to every unnecessary call in Hawthorne County. I knew him. Patricia had called him to my house 2 weeks earlier, claiming Sal's assessment truck constituted an unpermitted commercial obstruction. Officer Cole had examined the truck, the permit, the nomination paperwork, and Patricia's clipboard. Then he had said, "Ma'am, a parked carpenter is not a civil emergency." Now he approached the front desk. The city attorney whispered to him and pointed toward the laptop. Officer Cole sighed. Patricia straightened. "Officer, I would like to report the unauthorized public disclosure of confidential association materials." Officer Cole looked at the projector. "Did someone take your computer?" "No." "Did someone access it?" "The file opened without my consent." "Who was holding the remote?" Patricia looked down at the remote, still in her hand. "The equipment malfunctioned." Officer Cole nodded. "So you opened your own file during your own presentation on your own computer. That is an oversimplification. It is 4 nouns and a verb. The material is privileged. Your attorneys say it isn't theirs. They're mistaken." Both attorneys shook their heads. Patricia's voice sharpened. "This is exactly the kind of coordinated hostility the association has been dealing with. Mr. Bell has encouraged residents to undermine the board, hidden behind city procedures, and refuse to obey a lawful directive." Officer Cole looked at me. "Did you cut the fence?" "No." "Remove it?" "No." "Threaten anyone?" "No." He looked at Patricia. "What crime are you reporting?" "Interference with association governance." "That is not a crime. Unauthorized recording. It happened in a public hearing. Exposure of confidential strategy." "You displayed it." "Harassment." "By whom?" Patricia gestured toward the room. "All of them." Officer Cole surveyed the 46 residents, 7 commissioners, 3 city staff members, 2 HOA attorneys, 1 heritage contractor, and Dennis, who appeared to be reconsidering every life decision since joining the board. Then Officer Cole delivered his summary in the same flat voice he might have used to announce that a vending machine was out of chips. "Ma'am, you fined a man for an approved fence, documented your plan to pressure him, and projected the plan onto a city wall." Patricia opened her mouth. Officer Cole raised one hand. "This situation does not require police. It requires minutes." He walked out. The commission voted unanimously. The Briar Farm boundary fence was designated a Hawthorne City Heritage Structure. Resource number HCR 118. The designation protected its full historic height. Not 6 feet. Not approximately 6 feet. 8 feet. 1 3/4 inches at the highest hand-shaped board. The commission also designated the original gate, hardware, cattle mark, and 30-inch preservation buffer along both sides. That meant the HOA could not staple notices to it, paint it, trim it, attach signs, alter adjacent grade, or replace original boards without city review. Patricia had wanted control of 23 inches. Instead, she helped create a protected zone 112 feet long. The official plaque arrived 4 weeks later. It was cast bronze, 14 inches wide, and mounted beside the gate on a separate approved post. Briar Farm boundary fence constructed circa 1927, Hawthorne City Heritage Resource, HCR 118. Below that was a smaller interpretive sign, describing how the fence preserved evidence of the orchard that once occupied the hill. The city held a dedication ceremony on September 9th. Malcolm Reed spoke. Sal spoke. I spoke for 47 seconds because my coffee was getting cold and I knew my limitations. More than 70 neighbors attended. Children traced the old tool marks with their fingers. My father's initials were visible in the third post from the gate. The preservation staff left them because they were part of the fence's documented history. The local newspaper ran a photograph of Sal, me, and Commissioner Voss standing beside the plaque. Patricia appeared in the background near the lemonade table, looking like she had swallowed a lemon whole and discovered it had hired counsel. The HOA fines did not survive. Clarion Mills Legal Group withdrew the demand after reviewing the original 1993 approval minutes. Their letter stated that newly located archival evidence rendered continued enforcement inadvisable. Newly located. The document had been in a labeled box inside the clubhouse storage closet between pool filter warranties and holiday wreath guidelines. Dennis found it in 11 minutes. The board held an emergency meeting. 158 homeowners attended in person or by proxy. Patricia tried to call the meeting to order using the repaired gavel. The head fell off again. This time, Dennis picked it up and placed it gently in front of her. A motion was made to remove Patricia as president. The vote was 139 in favor, 11 against, and 8 abstentions. Linda resigned before the count was announced. Dennis became interim president because everybody trusted him and nobody else wanted the job. His inaugural address lasted 9 seconds. Pay your dues, don't block the hydrants, and try to keep things reasonable. Yeah? The room gave him a standing ovation. An independent review found that Patricia had authorized $6,840 in legal expenses without the required board vote. She had also directed Eugene Dobbs to enter 3 other properties, issued fines based on outdated architectural maps, and used association funds to purchase the Amber Light for Linda's golf cart. The Amber Light cost $312. It had no lawful purpose. Dennis sold it online to a man who operated a pumpkin patch parking lot. The HOA's insurance carrier refused to cover Patricia's pressure campaign because intentional enforcement misconduct fell outside the policy. The association did not collapse, but it changed. The board reduced its meeting schedule from twice a month to quarterly. The violation committee was dissolved. Exterior complaints now required 2 board members to verify the governing documents before sending a notice. Anonymous complaints had to involve an actual health, safety, or property issue. Fence appears intimidating was not included. The neighborhood softened. Carol Simmons planted sunflowers along her garage without submitting a 17-page landscape modification packet. Mark Jeffries repainted his front door deep blue, the same color it had been before Patricia ordered it changed to approved coastal slate. Children started cutting through the small public path beside my house again, on their way to the park. Winston Hale stopped by one afternoon and rested his hand on the oldest fence post. "I thought we'd lost all of this," he said quietly. "Not yet." He nodded. "Your grandfather would have enjoyed this." He would have charged admission. Patricia remained in Meadow Glen for another 5 months. She resigned from every committee, removed the HOA magnet from her Lexus, and stopped attending community events. Then she sold her house for $38,000, below the original asking price, and moved to a downtown condominium called The Meridian. The Meridian had no lawns, no private fences, and an exterior appearance controlled entirely by a professional management company headquartered 2 states away. I heard she joined the resident parking committee. Some instincts survive relocation. As for the fence, it is still 8 feet, 1 3/4 inches tall. I inspect it every spring. Sal handles any conservation work. The city sends a preservation officer every 3 years. Tour groups occasionally stop beside the plaque, though tour group usually means 6 retirees and a golden retriever moving at the speed of local government. I keep Patricia's first violation letter framed in my workshop. Beside it is a copy of the heritage designation. The violation letter demanded that I cut 23 inches off a fence that had survived storms, deer, developers, 4 generations of my family, and nearly a century of changing rules. The designation guarantees that no one can make that demand again without first explaining themselves to 7 historians, a preservation officer, and Sal Moretti's eyebrows. So now, whenever someone asks why my fence is so tall, I point to the bronze plaque and tell them the truth. It isn't too tall, it's historically accurate. What would you have done if an HOA ordered you to cut down a piece of your family's history? Tell me in the comments. And if you enjoyed watching a clipboard accidentally create a landmark, like the video, and subscribe to Sovereign Judgment. Patricia wanted 23 inches removed. The city gave those inches tenure.